Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 53 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. This is our live show going into the first week of your fantasy football playoffs. Hope everybody's having a great morning. Hopefully the injury report wasn't too brutal to you like it is to me. And hopefully we can help you guys get those wins going into these playoffs. But before we get to that, we got to take some time for some quick plugs. So first off, thank you guys for tuning in. We go live every single Sunday. Nick, unfortunately, co-host, and for those of you that come in from the Barstool interview, he is in California on vacation. He was not planning on being here for the show. For those of you that don't know from our regulars, Nick had an interview with Barstool Sports with Dave Portnoy, John Gruden, been going very, very viral. And thank you to our OG supporters. We've gotten a ton of love over the last few weeks with it. We've had our subscriber count more than double. We've had our viewership triple, quadruple, depending on the episode. But don't worry, to our OGs, we always remember you and always appreciate you guys coming in weekly. Nick out in California on a pretty sick trip to Disneyland. I have some of his notes from some of his guys. He wanted to make sure that he could still be present for the show, but I was not going to make him wake up at 5:30 a.m. to do the live show on his vacation. So here we are, but you guys know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell. You guys get the gist. Let's get right into it. Feel free to start dropping those questions. And we could get right into it. So first off, Caldwell, morning. Stanley, good morning. Victoria, good morning. Scott, morning. Joseph, my guy Joe. Happy playoffs. Yes, happy playoffs to everybody. Unfortunately, got some Cooper Cup action on Thursday. So struggling there. Good morning, Emil. And let's kick it off over to Emil. First question of the episode: with Tillman and Njoku possibly out, would you start Elijah Moore over Devontae Smith? I think that's a very good question. I do not like Devontae Smith this week. I don't like him going up against that Steelers defense. It's one of the best in football. AJ Brown's been making us stink over the last few weeks. So we know that he's going to try. And we know that offense is going to try and force him the ball. And even if not, Jalen Hurts, out of every starting quarterback that's played every single week this year, has the lowest amount of passing attempts. So they are not been putting up that passing volume with Saquon Barkley. I think they're either going to try and get him Saquon the MVP, or AJ Brown's going to just get spam square. If you play Madden, you know what that means. It's the wide receiver one. You just keep throwing the ball to him. I don't mind the Elijah Moore play over Devontae Smith with all of those injuries. Mike, Jerry Jeudy or Calvin Ridley in standard. Jerry Jeudy's on I believe 6 straight games with 50 receiving yards. Calvin Ridley going up against the Jets defense, one of the best in football. Let me take a look. I want to know. I should know this as the resident Jets fan. Okay, so it doesn't look like Sauce is on the injury report anymore, but DJ Reed is going to be out, and Brandon Eccles, that's our slot corner. So Calvin Ridley, as long as he's not getting shadowed by Sauce, which he might, but he probably won't, because Sauce hasn't really been shadowing as much as he did last year. He's a fine play, but I think Jerry Jeudy, we know that the Browns are going to try and keep that passing volume high. Jameis Winston is going to have that passing volume high. Jerry Jeudy's on an absolute heater. I do think you roll out Jerry Jeudy in that spot. Deshaun, what's up? Welcome back for the episode. Scott Green, full PPR, Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson. I would go with Jameis. I like the high passing volume. The Kansas City defense has, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, has not been the same as it was at the start of the year. I know we talked about the injuries a little bit earlier. Tillman, he's been out for a few weeks, and Winston has kept putting up numbers. Njoku's been very solid. I still think they got talent in that receiving core. I have no problem still putting out Jameis Winston in that matchup. I do not love the Russ going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Need 2 1 point PPR, Waddle or Flowers. Well, if you need two, and you got both. Okay, I see you throw it in the other ones down here. Need two. Waddle, Flowers, McCormick, Najee. Thank you. No problem. I love Jalen Waddle this week. I love the matchup. I love the upside. I love how he's looked with Tua ever since he came back from the injury. I definitely want to get Jalen Waddle in my lineup. Then it depends on the rest of your team, right? I mean, I think Zay Flowers is a fine play. More weeks than not. He's got a fairly safe target share. He's just not going to boom week to week. Where McCormick, we know that with all those running back injuries, is going to have a pretty safe floor on the touches side. Najee, very tough matchup, but over the last 6 weeks, I believe he has double digits in 4 of those games, and they're all against teams in the top 10 against the running back. So Najee's not matchup proof, but he is pretty safe. I like the upside of going with Flowers if you really need the points. If not, I like the floor of Najee between all of them. Okay, scrolling back up, going back to Deshaun. Should I stick with McConkey being game time decision or go with MVS or Leggett? Let me take a look. So that Chargers game is in that 4:00 slate. So yeah, that's going to be a tough call. Do you have if McConkey's out, do you have a pivot option on your waiver wire? I really don't want to force MVS out there. Legett's a pretty solid play. Carolina favored for the first time since 2022. Kind of crazy that's a stat. And he does have some good upside. He gets a lot of red zone work. They just don't get down the field all too often. And now Trayvon Diggs is out for the year. So pretty good upside for Leggett there. If you're more comfortable with one of those two, I would go with I would throw out Leggett, especially if you're projected to win. If you have a higher over under, if your opponent had some of those Rams or 49ers that stunk it up on Thursday Night Football, I think that's a good option. From our guy Joe, pick 2 Superflex, Goff, Stroud, Cousins. I would play Goff and Stroud. Goff, I have him on my all bust team. And it's just because I don't think he's going to be as good as everybody else projects, but it is the highest over under the week, and I'm never going to fade that. And then Stroud coming off rest. The team was very banged up. They're looking a little bit healthier, but Kirk Cousins is on a horrible streak. He has 0 touchdowns, 8 interceptions in his last 4 games. It's really not looked good for him. I don't think there's any way in your playoffs you can trust Kirk Cousins, especially in a primetime spot. I love the matchup against the Raiders, but there's no way with how he's playing that we can go out there and trust him like that. Yeah, I can't pronounce that one, so I'm not even going to try. Half PPR, pick 2, Jonathan Taylor, Rico Dowdle, James Cook. I would go with I don't love James Cook's matchup, but again, it's hard to pivot off the highest over under the week and the highest over under the season at 53.5. So I would lock in James Cook. The Colts, who do the Colts play this week? Denver. Yeah, Denver's pretty good against the running backs. It might be a shocker. I would bench Jonathan Taylor for Rico Dowdle. Dowdle's kind of on a hot streak. He's actually got a chance at 1,000 yards for somebody that really does not get a lot of love, and he probably didn't deserve it. But Carolina, worst team against running backs. They allow the most points per game to the running back position. I like the Rico Dowdle start. And the matchup, I would love to get Jonathan Taylor in there too in the flex. So I'm wondering who your flex wide receiver is that you're not putting in there, or what that looks like. Let me know for sure. But I that's the one I would. That's the way I feel. MVS sneaky play. Yeah, I agree. I think Jake Hayner said something like he's going to just throw the ball deep. He's going to let it rip. So we like to see that. But MVS. I feel like he hasn't had a game with more than 3 catches all year, so you really are banking on a touchdown from probably the team's 3rd or 4th quarterback option going into the year. So I don't know if I love that. Obviously, Derek Carr hurt. Taysom Hill they threw in at quarter. They love playing at quarterback. At least Sean Payton loved playing at quarterback. And Spencer Rattler. So this is not the number 1 guy for this team. And listen, we can hope he plays well for sure and for MVS, but there's a lot of problems on that team for me to trust MVS with that. So It's not like it's Chris Olave where you get that safe workload and safe floor. So I'm not comfortable there yet. Really going to depend on the matchup. Sam Darnold or Tua and Pollard or Charbonnet. I'd definitely go on Charbonnet over Pollard. Pollard popped up on the injury report. Looks like he's pushing to play, but Jets one of the top 10 teams against running backs this year. Sam or Tua, I got Tua on my all boom team, so give me 1 sec to pull up the notes because I am all over Tua this week. Over the last 4 weeks, he is the QB2 in that span, only behind the one and only Josh Allen, who had that 60-point or like the 50-point bomb the other night. His worst game is 23.5 points in that span, so safe floor. All the games he's finished in the top 10 in that span, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, averaging 330 passing yards per game. Texans allowed top 10 points per game to the quarterback, second highest over under the week. I think it spits all the reasons why you want that safe floor. Chicago's defense has been pretty good, and Sam Darnold did look pretty good against that defense a couple weeks back. So I wouldn't fault you for playing Sam. I think both are very good options. I don't think one really struggles more than the other. But for me, I really would want Tua in that warm weather matchup down in Houston with the upside and the safe floor that we've seen over the last few weeks. Best wide receivers in waivers are Austin or Bourne. Yeah, no, then I would definitely forcefully get out there, unfortunately. I don't think you're going to see McConkey play in this game unless if we see a report earlier on in the day. I feel like they're going to pregame test him, which isn't good enough to not start someone else in the 1 o'clock slate. Sorry, I wish I could be better predicting the injuries, but it kind of is what it is. From John, flex 2, Bucky, Rashad, Zay, and Pollard. I would go with Zay Flowers, and I go Bucky Irving. I want the better running back from the two of them. I know Bucky keeps getting dinged up, which is my one concern. But the Chargers are one of the best defenses in football, so typically in this spot, if it were an easier matchup, I would go play Bucky and Rashad and just take the safe floor of the two of them. But you're playing one of the best teams against the running back, so I can't force it out there. I go Zay Flowers and Bucky because I like Bucky's talent over Rashad. If you're not comfortable with that, then go with Pollard because it is a tough matchup either way. From Nick, pick 2, half PPR, CeeDee Lamb, Jonathan Taylor, and Joe Mixon. Well, I'm definitely putting in CeeDee Lamb, and I'm definitely putting in Joe Mixon, two of the best players at their position. I think you can totally pivot off of Jonathan Taylor in this matchup. From Mike, Pollard, Shakir, Devontae Smith for flex half PPR. I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir. I'm going to go with a guy that has a pretty safe floor over the past few weeks with Josh Allen and this offense. I really love the matchup for Khalil Shakir here, and he's just been so solid. The only bad game I think he had was the snow game, I want to say. But even that I don't think was too bad. Devontae Smith, I think they're going to force the ball to A.J. Brown. I don't like the Steelers matchup. And Tony Pollard just popped up on the injury report over the last 2 days, and he's going to play, but he was questionable going into the week, so that always concerns me. Should I play Breece Hall or Rico Dowdle? I love Rico Dowdle's matchup for sure, but I don't think you can bench him for a guy like Breece Hall, who is one of the best running backs in football, one of the guys you selected in the first 5-7 picks of your draft to lock and load. So usually this kind of question, I don't mind it if the other running back is on the same level or close to it. I think there's such a discrepancy in talent from Breece to Rico Dowdle where the matchup doesn't make sense to do it. Rico could definitely outscore him with their matchups today, but I think if you ran the way I like to think about fantasy is if this happened 10 times, 15, 20, what more likely happens? And in this spot, if you did this 20 times, I would say Breece Hall outscores Rico Dowdle on the majority of it. So that's kind of the way I try to use the fantasy football lens to peel back the curtain a little bit. So again, Rico could definitely outscore him, but Breece Hall more often than not is going to have that spot. Okay, my flex wide receiver is T. Higgins, who is having a homecoming game in Tennessee, plus Joe Burrow's comments earlier this week making me feel confident. Yeah, for sure. I love T. Higgins on the year. He was averaging the third most points per game of any wide receiver in full PPR up until this past week where he had the really bad game. But outside of that, he has been really, really good when he has been healthy. And we know Joe Burrow is going to let it rip. I will tell you one of my concerns that not a lot of people are talking about, which is why if you're spread better, I really like the Tennessee Titans this week. The former head coach is Arthur Smith, and the wide receiver 3 is Tyler Boyd. And if you guys know, both those guys, not Arthur Smith, what am I saying? Brian Callahan. Those two guys used to be obviously a part of that Bengals offense. So they know that coaching staff, they know that defense, they know the personnel a lot better than people think. And I think that is going to should help the offense. I know you don't want to bet on Will Levis scoring points, but I will say that that's a pretty good idea. Scott Green, full PPR, Hunter Henry, or Kyle Pitts. I would go with Hunter Henry. Kyle Pitts has been a disappointment this year. It would be not totally as disappointing as past seasons, but Kirk Cousins the last 4 weeks, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's not going to get the red zone work. He's not going to get the workload that you really need to thrive for fantasy. So I would be out on that one. Pick 2, John Caldwell, full PPR, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Reed, Drake London. That's a good one. I'm going to look at some over-unders in these ones. So you got Baltimore at the Giants. It is an over-under of 42.5 with 16.5 points to Baltimore. I'm going to do some quick math here, but they're pretty much saying that the Giants put up 13 points in this game. Yeah, that's not great. Ravens secondary is one of the worst in football, but with the ever-rotating quarterbacks from the Giants, I don't know if we're going to love that matchup and love that opportunity. For Neighbors, we know his workload is going to be safe, but I don't know if we're going to love his ceiling. Jaden Reed's ceiling is going to be super high in that Seattle matchup. I really like the opportunity. I think if I were you, I like Jaden Reed a lot. And then you look at Drake London, who has a very good matchup against the Raiders as well. But again, you do not have the start-sit upside of the start-sit upside. You do not have the upside of how well Kirk Cousins has been playing, and obviously you have the Monday Night Football matchup. So primetime Kirk Cousins doesn't always deliver. He has been better the last few seasons, but he has not been great. I would go with the safe floor of Malik Neighbors, and I would go with the high upside of Jaden Reed. I think Drake London falls somewhere in between on that scale. I know Reed had a bad game last week, but that's the boom bust potential. And unfortunately, that's what you take. You really could start any of these 3. I would love to know who your flex is to see if we can pivot. Okay, we'll hop down here to Joe, Kyle Pitts, or Dalton Kincaid. I would go with Dalton Kincaid if he's out there. The Lions are one of the better teams against the tight end position, but they are one of the most injured defenses in football. So I'm sure if I took the stat and tweaked it to the last few weeks, they don't look as good as they have at the start of that. So I would want Kincaid in what should be a super high scoring matchup. All right, guys, real quick before we go to the next question, thank you guys for joining in. Please make sure, like, comment, subscribe over on the YouTube channel. We go live every single Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Usually got my co-host Nick with me, but he is out on vacation, unfortunately. But unfortunate how the schedule's lined up with the first week of your fantasy football playoffs. But it is what it is. We figure it out. And I definitely wanted to make sure I was here for our OGs that have been here with all season. We got to make sure that we help you guys get that championship. And hopefully we get to see you next week after you win your matchups. Okay, next question from Sprout. Stone Smart, Kyle Pitts, or Michael Woods? In this spot, I would go with Kyle Pitts. I would chase the upside there in this spot. Okay, looks like we got a little bit of a lull in the question, so we'll take a look at some of the matchups real quick, give you guys some important injury news to keep your eye out for. And we will start off with the Kansas City Chiefs at the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns obviously got a ton of injuries to your fantasy relevant players. Cedric Tillman out with a concussion for the 3rd or 4th consecutive week. Very unfortunate for a guy that was really trending in the right direction, a guy that I was all in on the waivers And David Njoku questionable, trending towards not playing. Yeah, that's not a good sign from them on the Kansas City Chiefs side. Nothing you don't know. I mean, all your stars are kind of in. Obviously, outside of the ones you lost at the start of the year, your Hollywood Browns and your Rashee Rice, unfortunately. I will tell you, if you are watching this game, it is projected to be rainy and windy. So this could become a very ugly football game very quickly. So just keep your eye out for that. If there's a pivot involving that, I don't mind. I don't mind pivoting in that spot because it is. We saw it on Thursday. If you watch the Thursday night football game and you have Cooper Kupp, he put up a goose egg, and it was not because he wasn't being targeted. He had 3 targets in the first quarter. Yes, he did get pivoted off of after that. They didn't really throw him the ball, and it was just because Stafford had wet hands, was overthrowing the ball, was not very accurate. It happens. It's football. And it hurts your fantasy team, unfortunately. We saw a lot of people struggle in that game. One thing to keep your eye out for, if you are not paying attention to your kicker position, Harrison Butker is supposed to come back from the injury today. If that happens, I know there's a lot of people with Kansas City kicker playing. Make sure that you pivot off of him. I'd forget the third string backup's name, but make sure you pivot. If you find out at 11:30 that he is going to be out there and playing. From John Colwell, my tight end has been a problem all year. Thought it would be fixed with Taysom Hill. Jordan Atkins, if David Njoku can't go. My opponent has Njoku. I would pick up the handcuff for Njoku. I forget who that is. Another question from John Okonkwo. Or Darnell Washington. I know Nick, other Nick, is a big fan of Okonkwo this week, so I do not mind rolling up your sleeves and getting a little frisky with the tight end from the Titans. Don't mind that play. And I would probably go with his recommendation on that one. If you're not comfortable with Okonkwo, I would go with whoever the handcuff is for Njoku, because Kansas City, not good against the tight end position. Whoever the backup is not going to be as good, obviously, as Njoku, but that has been a tight end spot that has thrived for the last 2 years. Njoku, tight end 1 last year from week 6 on, and he was a tight end 4 this year since Deshaun Watson got hurt. So I don't mind that handcuff, but Okonkwo is also a very solid player. From Dylan, playoffs, damn right, full PPR, lost Kanon. Yeah, man, that sucks. That's not fun. 1 running back, 1 flex, 1 tight end. Running backs, Bucky Irving, Jaleel McLaughlin, Jerome Ford, I assume that's Braylon Allen, and Tajay Spears. I'd go Bucky Irving from that slate. Wide receivers, Jameson Williams or Devontae Smith. I'd go Jameson Williams, highest over-under of the season, 53.5 points over there. Devontae Smith, I am very worried that they are going to force feed the ball to A.J. Brown and try to get Saquon that MVP, which is not a good spot for Devontae Smith. He's just too low of a floor in this game. He does always have a high ceiling, but his floor is just too low for me. And then tight end, Zach Ertz. You already have Terry McLaurin starting. That's good to know. Dalton Schultz or Pat Freiermuth. That's a good one. I still would probably lean on Zach Ertz in that spot. If you don't want to play both of them, just because I feel like Zach Ertz has the safest floor of the 3. If you want to pivot off Zach Ertz, if you're not comfortable playing 2 pass catchers from the same team, I would go with Pat Freiermuth of the other 2. I don't think either one of them is a bad play. I just feel like Ertz is the safer floor. I don't love Freiermuth going up against that Eagles defense. From Lex, Bucky Irving, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins need 2 running backs and 1 flex. I like Bucky Irving. I like who are the Patriots looking at? I should know that as a Jets fan. Arizona. Okay, that's not a horrible matchup. They're kind of like middle of the pack against everything. I'm going with Ramondre Stevenson, and then if you need 1 flex, I would go with I'll go DeAndre Hopkins. I like the I feel like Hopkins has been pretty solid. This floor has been pretty safe the last few weeks. So I would go with the safe play of Hopkins in that one. From Spro, full PPR. Need one, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, Warren, or DeAndre Swift. I'll go with Tony Pollard in this one. I am worried about the injury that popped up on the report the last couple days, but if he's out there, which it looks like he's going to be, he's the one of the three with the best matchup with the best workload of the three of them. I do not want DeAndre Swift. I think he sucks at football personally. And he has not looked good since Shane Waldron's been fired, the offensive coordinator. He did not look good last week after Matt Eberflus got fired. So that to me is not a good spot. Najee Harris, I don't love the matchup. I don't love going up against the Eagles, although I will give him credit because he has been a little bit not matchup proof, but he has definitely beaten my expectations over the last few weeks against teams that are really good against running backs. So I do think Najee is a little bit better of a play than I probably give him credit for. Okay, next game from the slate. Sorry guys, when you're one man crew with two monitors, it is very hard to go between injuries and the chat and all this stuff, but we're doing our best out here. All right, Cincinnati Bengals versus the Tennessee Titans. I think the Titans have a good spot this week to be pretty good against the Cincinnati Bengals. That Bengals defense and that secondary is horrible. I love the upside over there for the Titans pass catchers. As long as Will Levis could figure it out, it doesn't look like he did last week, but division matchups are always tough. Again, to give some credit, I mentioned it earlier. The Titans head coach Brian Callahan was the offensive coordinator over there, so he's going to know that defense very, very well. I'm sure he really wants to win this game, obviously, and put the Bengals at 6-8. Sorry, guys, 8:30. Tired, man. Anyways, then we got the Bengals. They are dinged up everywhere. That's not important for your fantasy team, but is important. Offensive line, they've got multiple injuries over there. Some injuries on their D line and their secondary and their linebacking core. They're not very healthy this week. So good opportunity for the Titans. I do like Calvin Ridley. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine had that long touchdown streak. Last week they did not score a touchdown. Hopefully he can get back on the board this week, but it's not comfortable enough of a start for me. I do like Calvin Ridley in the matchup. I do like Tony Pollard, but I will, again, warn he popped up on the injury report with an ankle injury, and he is projected to play, but that can always be a concern. From Deshaun, 16-man league, start, flex, PPR, De'Ami Brown, Jalen Coker, Kamani Vidal. I would go. Oh man, this is really chasing it. I would go with I like Jalen Coker as a player, but it's fantasy playoffs. It's so weird to have to answer this one. I would go Jalen Coker, and for the flex, I would go. If it's just a start flex, so if it's just one start, it would be Jalen Coker. If it's two, it's Kamani Vidal, number 2. I don't want De'Ami Brown out there. Emil, any idea on what the weather is like for the Chiefs-Browns game? Yeah, I saw a report that it's supposed to be windy and rainy. Let me take a look real quick for you. So it does look like it's raining and snowing this morning. It doesn't give me the hour-by-hour breakdown, but it looks like it's raining and snowing right now. So and pretty windy. So not great to watch football, not great for your fantasy players, unfortunately. From Jeff Rogers, Calvin Ridley, or Brian Thomas Jr. Man, that's a good one. I don't love the matchup up against the New York Jets for Brian Thomas Jr. This week, especially with Mac Jones, I would go with Calvin Ridley. I'd go with the matchup over there. Even though Brian Thomas Jr. looked good last week after Trevor Lawrence went down and it went to Mac Jones. So I will say he did look pretty solid in that spot, but I think the Titans defense and the Jets defense are two totally different ballparks. Okay, guys, next game of the slate, we have the Washington Commanders at the New Orleans Saints. Jake Haener is your starting quarterback. If I am a Saints manager, I only want to play Alvin Kamara. If you have to force somebody out at tight end, I do not mind Juwan Johnson. If you have the David Njoku injury or the Evan Engram injury, then I have to deal with that in 2 leagues. So I do not mind because he's one of those deeper tight end plays on your waiver wire. Not a bad option. We know rookie quarterbacks like to lean on the tight end position. Jake Haener are going to have to look towards the middle of the field with him. So do not hate that matchup in that spot over there. You do also get a revenge game for Marshawn Lattimore, who just got traded out of there from the Commanders. So something to keep your eye out on for whichever player is the wide receiver one in that spot and in that matchup. We obviously like Jaden Daniels. We like Terry McLaurin. We like Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has been safe floor over the last few weeks. So good matchup over there from those guys. Next up, Baltimore Ravens at the New York Giants. 16.5-point favorite for Baltimore. Really 42-point over under. So they are pretty much telling you that they think the Baltimore Ravens are going to score in the range of 28, and they think the Giants either score 13 or 14 points. Yeah, they're saying it's all Baltimore. I think everybody kind of agrees with that, especially with the QBs rotating. The Ravens absolutely crush the Giants and the entire NFC with Lamar Jackson. I believe his record's like 23-2 now, or 23-1. He's on a heater in that spot. So just something to keep your eye out for over there. All right, we got a few questions popping in. We'll get right into it. So yeah, there you go. There's the weather report. Rain in Cleveland. Love the use of the emojis here. A little bit of a break. Yeah, it's still going to be wet and humid over there. Not great football conditions for fantasy. Russ or Kyler? Love this question every single week. 4 points passing, 6 points rushing. I go Kyler Murray in the spot. I don't love Russell Wilson over here. I do not love the matchup against the Steelers. I'm really not a fan of that one. So I would go Kyler. I think he offers a safer rushing floor. He offers this, not the safer passing floor, but the rushing upside of Kyler is definitely better. Both quarterbacks have been very solid this season for sure, but I would go with Kyler, who I think has the higher upside. From Craig Wayne, DK or Breece Hall? I go Breece Hall. I do not love DK's matchup. I will say Jair Alexander is out, which was a big concern of mine. But DK's usage has not been great. His upside has been less than ideal over the course of the season. Breece Hall is going to offer you that safe rushing floor in one of the easiest matchups of the week at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Breece should be very explosive, and Breece should. I'm hoping Breece rips off a couple big runs because I could use a big game or two from him. From Deshaun, pick 2, half PPR. Malik Neighbors, Cortland Sutton, Tyrone Tracy, Michael Pittman, Keon Coleman, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Kyle Pitts. Between the two, but picking 2, my first instinct is Malik Neighbors safe floor with that PPR work and chasing the upside of Keon Coleman in the highest over-under of the season. I like Tracy too, but I do not want 2 New York Giants. I think the Giants are going to have to pass the ball to stay in this game or to play catch up in this game. Obviously, I think the game script against Baltimore with Baltimore versus the NFC has always been that. So I do like Malik Neighbors in that spot. From Jeff Rogers, Cade Otton or TJ Hawkinson. Hawk has not looked great over the last few weeks. Cade Otton has been pretty much irrelevant with Mike Evans off the field, or with Mike Evans on the field. So I don't want to put Cade Otton out there. I'd rather chase the upside of TJ Hawkinson. From Spro, need 3 full PPR. Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, and Khalil Shakir. This is a great one. I love all 3 of these options this week. Uh, all right, if I wanted to be the safest, I would go with Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, and Khalil Shakir. I think those are your three safest starts. If you want to chase the upside, I would play Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, and Khalil Shakir. Malik Neighbors gets that safe workload, but I'm so concerned about the QB play over there. I think Baltimore is going to have the ball for 37 plus minutes of this game. I really think it's a horrible matchup for Malik Neighbors, frankly. And I don't love it, but I know he's going to get in the 8 to 12 target range. So I really do not want to. Obviously, you want to play that because you know it gives you the safe floor. I just don't think he's scoring more than 15 points, where I think Garrett Wilson can get you 20, Khalil Shakir can get you 20, Jalen Waddle can get you 20. Now, the floor is lower for those other three guys, but I mean, I guess you get to make the shadow call. If it were me in my lineup, Jalen Waddle would be the one on the bench because he could literally only see 2 to 3 targets in a singular game. Garrett Wilson's going to see that workload against an easy secondary with Rodgers coming off his best game in 2 years. Khalil Shakir has been one of the safest floors over the last few weeks, and I would take Malik Neighbors' floor as well. Joe, great question. Can Deebo Samuel be dropped 5 straight weeks under 7 fantasy points? I think it's a great question. I personally would not drop him, but I would not play him. And I'll tell you why I wouldn't drop him. Because someone is going to pick him up off of name alone. Someone else that is in your playoffs is going to pick him up. You still do not want to see Deebo Samuel in someone else's lineup because of the upside that he can have. And of course, it would kill you to know you dropped a guy that was a star in this league for years to have him wind up beating you in championship week or in the semifinals. So I really am not a big fan of the strategy personally, but I understand. I'm not a fan of dropping him, but I totally understand the hesitancy to play him. I would rather just keep him on the bench and leave him there for the rest of the year because I don't think there's anything he can do over the next 2 weeks to prove that he should be starter outside of some massive injuries and it really just being him as the only way that they can move the offense. John should have been dropped. Yeah, honestly, if I think the first 5 games of the season were 7 points and under, then yes, I would have dropped Deebo. But with it being this late in the year, I do not want to see it. I do not want to lose because I dropped Deebo Samuel and someone else played him against me. Crooked Commish, love the name. Morning, first timer here. Help the Commish out, would you? PPR, 3 wide receivers. T. Higgins, Jordan Addison, Brian Thomas Jr., Devontae Smith, Tank Dell, or Roma Dunze. I'm going to scratch off Roma Dunze, and I'm going to scratch off Tank Dell. I don't think that those two have been great this year. I don't think that their floors are upside. I don't think their ceiling has been that high. So I do not want to play any of the 3 of them. Between the other guys, I would roll out. My first 2 are T. Higgins and Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison on an absolute heater right now. I don't think you could bench him. T. Higgins played a horrible game last week, but before that, he had the 3rd most points per game when he was healthy and out on that football field. He was only behind Jamar Chase and I believe Nico Collins. So T. Higgins has been very, very good this year when he's been healthy. Just a really rough showing this past week. So then the question becomes Brian Thomas Jr., Devontae Smith. I don't love either's matchup this week. Brian Thomas Jr. is going to see a lot of Sauce Gardner. And Devontae Smith, I think that the Steelers are going to force feed the ball to A.J. Brown, or they're going to try and win Saquon the MVP. I feel like that's the 2 routes that it goes. I think that's the approach that the team takes. Frankly, it's the approach I would take based off this past week's comments and everything in between. I would go Brian Thomas Jr. over Devontae Smith. I think those first 3 are the ones I like of the group, but it's definitely not locked and loaded. They're safe any which way. From Deshaun, choose 2. Malik Neighbors, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison, Zay Flowers. I'd go Malik Neighbors, and I'd chase Marvin Harrison's upside in this one. Mark Folkman, Hunter Henry, Jake Ferguson, half PPR. Thank you. You are welcome. I would go with Hunter Henry. I do not love Jake Ferguson. I think he's a good start if you had one of those big tight end injuries and you really needed a stretch. Like that's a good one you could have grabbed. But I love Drake May and the way that he has looked. Don't love him because I'm a Jets fan. I don't love that division with him. But I do think Hunter Henry has been a more talented player. He's been a better fantasy football player for seasons. I do not mind the spot start there. Okay. Dale Sullivan. Happy playoffs, fam. Absolutely appreciate the season. Yep, that's what we're looking for. And real quick before we get to the question, because it did remind me, make sure everybody like, comment, subscribe. It is fantasy football playoff week. We are hoping you tune in next week. I will have my co-host Nick with me for it. Nick, you all remember, of course, especially our OGs, who did get that awesome Barstool interview going viral for the last week or so. Super proud of Nick. We have not heard back yet. So for those people that are wondering, he has not heard back on what's happening, and I'm hoping he gets an update soon that he can share with you all. But quick question: Rico Dowdle or Najee Harris in full PPR? I would like Rico Dowdle's matchup here. Panthers allow the most points per game to the running back position. Najee Harris going up against the Eagles, who are top 5 against running backs. So I think they're very similar talent. Najee's a better running back than Dowdle, but not by much. And I would rather go with Rico Dowdle in the much, much, much easier matchup here. Down for IDP. Listen, you can shoot it. I can't promise I'm going to have a great answer. Because there's always a shot I don't know one of the players' names from not being an IDP person. And for those of you that don't know what IDP is a league format where rather than playing a team defense, for example, the Jets today against the Jacksonville Jaguars, you pick maybe it's 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 2 cornerbacks, or some combination of defensive players themselves. So rather than the Steelers defense, you have to draft TJ Watt. Very interesting format. It's not very popular in fantasy football nowadays, but it is a lot of fun if you are a serious fantasy football player. I can't find any other people that really want to do it, but here we are. So Sean, definitely feel free to send that over. But let's transition to the Dallas and Carolina game while we wait for some more questions in between. Listen, I've said it all week. I've said it all morning on this show. I think Rico Dowdle is coming to play. He is chasing 1,000 yards now, which is crazy to think about based off how the start of the season went. And he's got the easiest matchup of the week going up against that Carolina Panthers defense. I really, really, really like Rico Dowdle's floor. I like his upside. Carolina is favored for the first time since 2022. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to steal this game from them, and I think it's embarrassing, frankly. Dallas's defense is legit, although we are going to see, although we are not going to see Trayvon Diggs, who is dealing with an injury now out for the year from knee surgery. So some concerns there. I want CeeDee Lamb. I want to take advantage of my Cowboys in this matchup. So CeeDee Dowdle, if you are on the Carolina side, that offense has looked pretty good. I do not mind playing Xavier Legette, and I think Chuba Hubbard is going to be very, very explosive. So this is where we got to take some accountability on the show. Deshaun, Zach Bond, Keyshawn Nixon, Jordan Fuller, Kyle Hamilton. I know who Jordan Fuller and Kyle Hamilton are, but I don't really know which one would be the best player for it. So I am going to say go with your gut, because I do not have a good answer for you. I apologize to Sean. But I know it comes down to tackles. I can say this. I would not go with Kyle Hamilton, like Joe said, because I do think you want a defense that's going to get tackles against the running back. I do think that the Giants are not going to have the ball much in this game. So I think Tyrone Tracy might only get 6 to 10 carries because the game script's going to be Baltimore crushing it, frankly. So I will say Kyle Hamilton, who is the best talent on the board, would be the one I do not want to play in the matchup. But up to you. Are we going to see you on Barstool as well? Congrats to you both. No, you will not. Nick, you got an interview for a behind-the-scenes gig, and we are rooting him the best, absolutely. And luckily, luckily he's doing very well, and we appreciate all the love that's come over to the show. We have seen our viewership more than double on some of our episodes. Our subscribers have more than doubled. Our social media is getting a lot of likes and comments, but don't forget, we know where all our OGs are who have been with us since week 1, 2, 3, whenever, and always tune in at 8:30 a.m. every Sunday. So we know who our guys are, and we're rooting for our guy Nick over there. From Crooked Commish, thanks for the help. One more for you. 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, 1 flex. We got DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Brian Thomas Jr., Amari Cooper, Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, or flex for tight end Sam Laporta. Let's take it to the wide receivers first. I like Mike Evans. In his matchup, I know that it's not a super high upside against the Chargers defense, but Mike Evans is the heart and soul of that team, as he has been for years. He's been so consistent over his time there. I really like that start. And for your second wide receiver, I would go with Brian Thomas Jr. against the New York Jets. I don't love Mac Jones, obviously. But I will give Mac Jones this. He has played against the Jets for multiple years in the division. The Jets defense has not looked as good. They have 2 injuries to their cornerback 2 and cornerback 3. So I do think Brian Thomas Jr., if they move him around the field, he will not be shadowed as much by Sauce, and that's their best opportunity. Running back, I like Bijan Robinson, obviously. I like Alvin Kamara, obviously. So those are definitely the 2. So the flex question becomes, in my eyes, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard. I would go with Tony Pollard. And I've been out on Jonathan Taylor for most of the year. I don't like him with Anthony Richardson. Denver Broncos, one of the best teams against the running back position. I do not love that start. Tony Pollard has been very solid this year. It's a very good matchup for him. But I am worried about the injury that popped up on the injury report. So I would lean Pollard, but I do not mind Jonathan Taylor. I think if you go with either one of those 2, you'll be fine. Okay, I'm jumping down the board. Flex play, PPR, Tyrone Tracy or Malik Neighbors. I'd go Malik Neighbors. I'm worried about Tyrone Tracy not getting enough touches because the game script is not going to be very good in this spot. Joe, don't take my word. I'm just going off name. Well, listen, man, that's why you're not an IDP. I could talk to Joe. Joe's one of the boys. And for those of you that don't know, Joe is Other Nick's younger brother on the show who helps us moderate the chat. So shout out to Joe and good luck in your playoffs. Just not against me if we're against each other in any leagues. Anyway, Evan Gittleman, full PPR, pick 2, Mike Evans, Chuba Hubbard, JSN. I like Chuba Hubbard, safe floor. And I would go with not Mike Evans. I'd go with JSN. He's on fire. He's the wide receiver 5 on the season, which is nuts to think about. He's going crazy, man. I don't think you can bench JSN. Mike Evans, the reason I would bench him over Chuba has a super good matchup against that Cowboys defense. Chuba has been on fire. Now we have Jonathan Brooks with a season-ending injury. It's going to be the Chuba show. I think Chuba's going to win people fantasy championship. I think he's one of the few guys this year that has that kind of schedule and could go off, frankly. I think he's very good, and I think that's what we're looking at. From Sproul, 2 flex, half PPR, Jalen McMillan, Butte, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Coker, McNichols, Pitts. I'd chase the upside of Jalen McMillan. I don't love it, but I mean, it's a chase no matter what. And then I'd probably go Kyle Pitts because I just think he's the most talented on the board. Since you're flexing him, I do not mind. Also getting to watch Kyle Pitts on Monday Night Football. I will say something that I do think will be a fun storyline for Monday. You got the Raiders and you got the Falcons. Well, you got who should have been the generational tight end in Kyle Pitts, and you have who is the generational rookie tight end in Brock Bowers. So hopefully he shows up for that match. Deshaun, I beat out Nick for final playoff spot in our league. I know he hates me. Oh, I'm sure Nick is not very happy about you beating him out for that playoff spot. Nick sends me a lot of nasty language when he loses in fantasy football. So I am sure he's not very happy about it. But that's the name of the game. Listen, I do a fantasy football show. Do as much analysis as I can. I am in 5 leagues. I've got a bye in 2. I've got a playoff matchup in 1, and I'm out of the playoffs in 2. I'm 6-8 and 7-7 in other leagues. Sometimes the schedule don't fall your way. It's happened. Sometimes the injuries don't align for you. It happens. Listen, you can't be great in all your leagues, but it doesn't still makes us upset when we don't win those big ones. From Dale, PPR, need 2 wide receivers. Khalil Shakir, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jalen Waddle, Quentin Johnston, and Xavier Worthy. I'm going to go Khalil Shakir and Jalen Waddle. I like the highest over-under of the week in Khalil Shakir. Marvin Harrison Jr., I wonder if you could flex him over whoever you got on the flex spot. Or maybe one of these receivers is a receiver and the second is the flex. But Jalen Waddle, I like the upside. I like how he's looked with Tua the past few weeks. I told a lot of people to go trade for him because I thought that he would really start to come on the scene and explode over the last few, and he really has done that. So I like Waddle in that spot. Okay, from Sergio, pick 2, full PPR, Rico Dowdle, Devontae Adams, JSN, T. Higgins, David Montgomery. Listen, you're stuck, but your good suck. So we like that, okay? I'm going David Montgomery, number 1. I think he's going to be absolutely explosive. He has been super safe floor all year. It's the highest over-under of the season. It's a running back going up against the Bills, and the Bills are not good against the running back position. There's a lot to like from David Montgomery this week. I am locked in on him. Now, I like T. Higgins. I like Rico Dowdle. They are not on the tier of JSN and Devontae Adams this season. If you want the safest option with the highest upside, it's JSN. If you want to risk it for the biscuit, I love Devontae Adams. I am a Jets fan. I love Devontae Adams in this matchup against the Jaguars. But JSN has been your wide receiver 6 over the course of the year. 5, tied for wide receiver 5 in the course of the year. I do not think you can pivot in your fantasy football playoffs, knowing now that Jair Alexander is also out of this matchup. I think JSN makes a ton of sense, and you hope you get that Sunday night football miracle from him. I'll say Self, because I don't know if I can properly pronounce it, but I'm going to assume it's Self. Morning Man, Darnell Mooney, or DK Metcalf in the flex. I would go Metcalf. I do not like Metcalf this week, personally, but I like him a bit more now knowing Jair got ruled out for the game. Also, do not love Darnell Mooney. Kirk Cousins has been bad the last 4 weeks. It has been a horrible showing from him. We're looking at 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions over the last 4 weeks. Not great. Not great. Okay, wow. A lot of stuff just came rolling in. So give me 1 second to get through these. Joe Jacoby, I'm here for 2 things. Ask fantasy questions and bam, bots you damn straight. Stan Barshall should have both of you. Listen, we're just rooting for Nick. Not about me. It's all about Nick for me. Nick and I have literally been best friends for 22 years. We're 25 years old. I am rooting for Nick like anybody else on this planet. I peel back the curtain a little bit. I'm getting married in a few weeks. Nick is literally the closest friend I have, right next to my brothers and my groomsmen. He is literally one of the closest human beings in my life. It is not about me. It's all about him. We are all rooting for him to get that call. So he's still waiting. He has not heard. I know there's a lot of people that came in the chat just now asking about it. It's all about him, and we are rooting for him to get that call. He's still waiting to hear back. Jeff Rogers, Jacoby Myers, or Calvin Ridley. I'm going to go Jacoby Myers. Safer floor. The target share has been great. Calvin Ridley, love the matchup, but I love the upside of Jacoby Myers in this one. And I like that Monday Night Football aspect to it. Who gets the touchdown? Tracy or Neighbors? Played Tracy last week, and it worked out. Should have played Neighbors. Over Reed. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's the name of the game. Jaden Reed is up and down for sure. Malik Neighbors is the safe floor, so that's kind of is what it is. If I had to guess between the two of them who gets the touchdown, I'm always going to bet running back over receiver, even though the running back is, not more. Even though Neighbors is clearly a much better player than Tracy, if you're making a bet on it, running back is always the safer bet because it's more likely a running back hits the 1 yard touchdown than wide receiver gets in there. You look at some of the top tier receivers in football, go look it up. Look at the guys with the top receiving yards. You'll be like, oh, why do they have that few touchdowns? Maybe not the top 1 and 2 guys, but it really does not correlate perfectly. From Rockout, Tua or Bo Nix. We do like Bo, and we like the way Bo has looked against the Colts. And we'll look against the Colts. I am playing Tua. Tua is on an absolute heater right now. I have him on the All Boom team. Got some quick notes for you. Last 4 weeks, he's the QB2 on the week. His worst game in that span, 23.5 points, averaging 25.2. In all of those games, he has finished in the top 10. 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, 330 yards per game in those games. Texans allow 10 points per game to quarterbacks, and it's a warm weather game. It is tied for the second highest over-under of the week. So I think he's a superstar, and I think he's been a superstar, and I know we are going to be rooting for him in this spin. From Jesus, Brees, Ramondre, Tracy, PPR start 1, or can start 2 if I bench Moore or Brian Thomas Jr. I would go Brees, and I would want to pivot off Moore for Ramondre, but I do not mind if you want to play DJ Moore because the upside is going to be higher there. Got a little lucky, and it happened to make the playoffs in all 4 of the leagues I'm in. Funny how that happens. Yeah, listen, it happens. It's great. You love to see it for sure. So good for you, and make sure you stop by next week as well because I'm sure you're going to advance in a few of them and get some more questions in. Rock out. Pick 2, Brian Thomas Jr., Devontae Smith, Isaiah Pacheco. I would roll with Pacheco. It is very windy and rainy and snowing in that game. Kansas City is going to hand the ball off to Kareem Hunt and Pacheco a good amount in this one. And I chase Brian Thomas Jr.'s upside over Devontae Smith. I've said it all show, but I know you just tuned in to Rock out. So real quick, I do think that the Eagles' game plan is going to be force feed the ball to A.J. Brown and hand the ball to Saquon Barkley. They want Saquon to win that MVP. They don't want their superstar receiver upset going into the postseason. One spot, Flowers, A.J. Brown, or Thielen. I go A.J. Brown in that spot. Could slide Connor out and play another. No, I'd rather have James Conner than my number 2 would be Zay Flowers. I'd rather have that one. Up and down. Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Congratulations. Crooked, who do you think has been the biggest fantasy disappointment this season? CMC, Hall, Travis Etienne, Laporta, Tyreek Hill. I don't think Tyreek's been as big of a disappointment because he was injured. Or no, he wasn't injured, but you have your star quarterback injured. Like, that doesn't help. And Tyreek Hill has been on a good streak the last few weeks. Been playing better. You have to say CMC because we thought he was playing up until the day before the game. Everybody drafted him going into the season at the 101, thinking he is locked and loaded. And he's been out there for, I believe, 2, maybe 3 games this year. And he was not even Christian. He did not look like Christian McCaffrey in those. He has to be the biggest disappointment, but I do hate blaming the injuries on that. Dale Sullivan, any thoughts on kickers this week? Have lots, but wondering if Koo is a good stash for some Monday night sparks. Yeah, I don't think Koo has looked that good. I'd rather go with Will Lutz in that one. I wonder who else you have in your leagues. I'm not a big kicker guy personally. But I would want someone that was probably dropped in leagues. You know what I would look out for? I would go check if Harrison Butker is available in your league because there's not a lot of people that roster 2 kickers for 3-4 weeks. So go see if Butker is available. I think that's a good idea. But I do not mind Lutz in this one. Playing Let's Sail in the Dome. Bo has been on. Yeah, no, don't mind the play at all. For sure. Keenan Allen or Reed Ugly? No, I go with Reed. You take the good with the bad. There's some players that have the upside and have the low floor. It happens. Think about Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is a total experience in fantasy football. You either get the 2 points, 3 points, or you get 28. It's the same thing with Jaden Reed, which is why he's drafted at the flex. He's not trustworthy week to week. and you're not going to feel confident, but you do know that any single game, Jaden Reed can go off and give you 15, 20 points in a singular play. He can go get you 15. That's how talented he is. So I'm a big fan of Jaden Reed. And I think if you take a guy like Jaden Reed in your drafts, you know the upside is just as high as the low side is low, and I think you have to ride it out. Last week it was rough, but I think he could pick it up this week against Seattle. Very good matchup for him to do it. John Caldwell, whichever one you took 101, most took CMC. I took Tyreek. Tyreek, biggest bust for me. Yeah, listen, I think that's valid. I traded for Tyreek Hill in a league at a good time, so I'm not going to complain about it. I did not draft him. I don't think he's been great. That's definitely true. But I mean, I cannot imagine if you were the person that took CMC and did not take Jordan Mason as your backup, like you really got stiffed in the first round of your fantasy. You've been playing catch up the entire year, especially because you got to think about if you draft him 101, you are not making another pick for another 20 or 24 picks. Like the next best guy that you got is really down on the board. And let's welcome in our co-host tuning in from the West Coast this morning, 6:33 a.m. over there for him. Good morning from Nick Jacoby. Welcome over to the chat, Nick. Everybody, you guys know our guy Nick, fellow co-host of the show, as we mentioned, is on vacation this week. That's where we're at. And we're rooting for Nick and his vacay. And of course, Nick would not be Nick and would not be the right host if he did not make those shameless plugs. So let's get to it. Like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. Hit that notification bell. So this way, every week for the rest of your fantasy football playoffs, roll over in bed, check your phone. First notification will be PrimeTimeFFPod is live answering your questions. Quickly hit that button, hit that notification, and you can always come right in and drop those questions. We also got 2 more shows for you during the week. Every Tuesday, waiver wire, and then Thursday or Friday, we hit you guys with our all boom and bust teams. We tell you each of us 7 guys that we love going into the week and 7 guys that we're either tempering expectations for or leaving on the bench if you've got that pivot. So definitely make sure to check out the channel for those 3. Okay, from Simp. All right, buddy. Love the name. Kincaid or Henry. I would go with I'd go Hunter Henry in that spot. Again, high over under for Dalton Kincaid, but the Lions are one of the best teams against the tight end position. Should I flex Justice Hill over Tracy? No, I would go with Tyrone Tracy. I do like the I like the logic of Justice Hill might get a ton of workload if by the third quarter they are up 30-0 or something like that. That is such a risk move. And listen, I love the risk, but Justice Hill really comes in. He gets a lot more snap share than you think. He gets 40 to 50% snap share per game, and they use him in passing situations. They really do not hand him the ball much. So it's not as locked and loaded as you might think for Justice Hill if they do go up big, where Tracy is going to be out on the field the majority of the game. You hope he can get a couple of those cheap PPR catches. You hope he can get 10 to 12 touches because we know that the team's going to control the ball. And you hope that that's the situation. I really don't like I don't mind the pivot and thinking like that, but I don't think I want to risk it in your fantasy football playoffs. Cup wanting to copy Reed from last Thursday was 0. Yeah, first goose egg since 2019 for Cooper Kupp. Absolutely horrendous. I have Cooper Kupp in a fantasy league that I am playing in. I'm in one league that's playing in the fantasy football playoffs this week. That's not on bye, and that's the one player I had from Thursday night. It was so grateful for him to do that to me. John Caldwell wishing Nick a good weekend at Disney. Absolutely. For guy Nick. Cortland Sutton or Calvin Ridley. This is a good question. I like Ridley's matchup. I know that they're going to have to pass to stay in that game, but Bo Nix has just looked so much better than Will Levis, and Cortland Sutton has been a safer play than Calvin Ridley this season. I'd go with Cortland Sutton in this spot. I don't mind it. I think you could go either way. I would say Cortland Sutton, safe floor. Calvin Ridley, high upside. From we'll call you Mr. Muhammad. From Mr. Muhammad, Cole Kmet or Smart at tight end. I would go with Kmet. I do not want to play Smart in his matchup. I'd rather the Bears tight end, the starter, the guy that we know will be out on the field, over a shot on a backup tight end. From Deshaun, full PPR, start at flex. Stevenson, Tracy, Keenan Allen, Kraft, Worthy. If you're starting one, I go with Ramondre Stevenson of the group. I see Nick recommends Keenan Allen. Nick's a bigger Keenan Allen fan than I have been this season. He's been more in. I like Ramondre Stevenson's safe floor. I don't think Keenan Allen gets enough PPR work personally for me to trust him week to week. I do think he's matchup dependent, and the matchup's not bad. He did look pretty good a couple weeks ago against the Vikings in this spot, but I do like Ramondre Stevenson's safe floor with this new reformed offense with Drake May. From Rockout, Jake Ferguson or Juwan Johnson. I would go Juwan Johnson with how many injuries there are on that team, and you get the rookie quarterback in Jake Haener. He's going to have to look at the tight end position. Juwan Johnson, the last 2 weeks since Taysom Hill's injury, has gotten a lot more workload, a lot more safe workload at least. Not enough to be comfortable starting him, but definitely a little bit more. Mr. Muhammad, Pollard, Leggett, or D-Hop. Choose one at the flex. I'd go Tony Pollard. I am concerned that he did pop up on the injury report a few weeks ago or a few days ago. But I would go with Tony Pollard if you're not comfortable with the injury, or if he does surprisingly get ruled out, I would transition to D-Hop. I am worried about the rain in that game. I am worried about the snow, the wind, like all those things do not look good in that Cleveland matchup. But I would want D-Hop over Xavier Leggett. Sincere McCormick or Tyrone Tracy. I would actually go Sincere in this one. The Falcons, not a great team against the running backs. I think that the Giants are going to be playing from behind, so your best upside is PPR work. But I think the Ravens are going to control the clock for 37 plus minutes of this game. They're barely going to get any snaps in for the Giants. I think it's going to be a huge discrepancy between the two teams. So I'm not loving the upside from the Giants this week with all these rotating quarterbacks. All right, we got a couple minutes here, so we will go back over to the games. We are at the New York Jets at the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game projects to be a corner game on your NFL Red Zone, but it is what it is. I love the Jets' upside in this one. I love Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. Not a good team at all in Jacksonville, and not a good defense at all in Jacksonville. Very good upside there for your New York Jets superstars. On the Jacksonville side of things, I do not want to play either of the running backs. Jets a very solid team against the run. There are a lot of injuries in that Jets secondary, but there's only one wide receiver worth starting from Jacksonville. It's Brian Thomas Jr., who will likely see sauce, which will be his biggest test of the season. So, I mean, if we're looking out for one thing, and I know it's not, you're not really looking for stuff now. Now you're just looking for your players to get points. I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of benching Brian Thomas Jr. this week if you have a good pivot, but I don't think you need to force it. Oh, sorry, Stanley. John Caldwell, for Nick G, the question, but I will still jump in and ask as well. Tyrone Tracy or Malik Neighbors playing London and Reed and Bijan and Achane, other flex options. Calvin Austin the third, with Pickens being out. Nick says Malik Neighbors. Yep, I agree with Nick. I think the game script is going to call more for Malik Neighbors to get some PPR work. Joe, do you think I have a good chance of ending Moldy's dynasty? No one has a chance at ending Moldy's dynasty. Stanley, any Jets players worth starting? Yep, just said it. Breece, Adams, Garrett Wilson, all locked in your lineup. Funny, Nick said the same exact thing. Okay, next question up. Miami Dolphins, and this is the last game of the 1 o'clock slate. Miami Dolphins at the Houston Texans. Houston coming off rest. I think this is a very important game. It's something that needs a lot of attention because it should project, and at the start of the year would have projected to be one of the games of the season. You got Tua healthy, been on an absolute tear the past few weeks. You have Tyreek Hill, who has looked better. Jalen Waddle, who has started to heat up over the last few. I believe he's the wide receiver 11 over the last 4 games. And you have Jonnu Smith, who's the tight end 1 over the last 4. Or like really, honestly, is on a huge stretch. John has been hot. You cannot pivot off of him. On the Houston Texans side of the ball, big question is going to be Tank Dell. Is a big stretch if you want to start him. The Dolphins secondary has looked very good. Dolphins secondary has looked great against wide receivers this season. I do not want to force Tank Dell into my lineups, but if you do need somebody, I do not mind the play just because this game really could be a super shootout in this one. From Rome, the host, am I crazy for starting Washington D over Baltimore? You are absolutely nuts for making that decision. But I don't mind it. Listen, it's Jake Haener. But if I were to look at the talent of the two defenses, I would want the better defense, which is Baltimore, than Washington. I think those are the two best defenses that you can have this week. I'd rather go Baltimore. I don't think there is a better defense that you can play. The implied point total for the New York Giants is 13 this week. That is the lowest of the year implied point total for any team this season. So they are saying they are not scoring points. I'll tell you right now, New Orleans is implied point total is about 16. So they're saying they'll be about a field goal better than the Giants. So you could go either way. I think it's more likely the Giants turn the ball over than the Saints, especially with the rotating options there. You also don't have a lot of tape on Haener. That's the thing that usually can struggle for people in fantasy football. Okay, quick from Deshaun, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy, Ramondre Stevenson, full PPR. I would go with. I don't want to play Tracy. I do not want to force him out there with the bad matchup to the Ravens. It's a tough team against the running back position. I don't love Pacheco in the rain, although I do think he's going to get touches because of the weather. I think Ramondre is the safest play of the three of them. I would say safest play is Ramondre, highest upside is Pacheco. You can assess what your team needs more of. Wish I had Adams. Yeah, don't we all for this one? Johnny had a goose egg last week until overtime. If that ends in regulation, do you think there's more of a reason to bench Johnny? Yeah, I mean, that's valid for sure, but we don't care. It could go to overtime. We want it to go to overtime. We want our players to score more fantasy points. So it is what it is. It was unfortunate up until then, but guess what? If you were in fantasy football and you had Jonnu Smith, you were probably stressed until 4 o'clock. And by 5 o'clock, when you saw, oh, he scored a shit ton of points, probably very happy about it. Lattimore revenge game? No, I get it, but I'm not going to put my fantasy football playoffs on the thoughts of a cornerback's revenge game when he requested a trade and the team traded him to the team he wanted to go to. So I'm not I get playing Washington, but the Ravens defense is better, is more talented, and the offense on the other side of the field is worse. They're both bad, but they're both the bottom tier of NFL offenses. Those are the two that I would want to take advantage of. All right, going into the 4 o'clock slate, Indianapolis Colts at the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, he's been on an absolute heater. He's coming off the bye now. We'll see how he looks. I don't love any of the running backs in this game on either side of it. Jonathan Taylor is a fine play because he has that safe workload, but I don't think he's going to be a stud. I wonder if there's any in chat. You could let us know. I wonder if anybody is starting Anthony Richardson. Go check your leagues. I'm curious if people are forcing him out there. He's played in, I believe, 16 NFL games, and he's been a top 5 quarterback in 4 of those games. So actually a pretty decent percentage to chase upside, but it is what it is. Denver Broncos, Cortland Sutton. We love Sutton in this matchup. Outside of that, I really do not love any player. You do get Josh Downs back from the injury, but Patrick Surtain on the other side of the ball, you got to imagine he's going to see a lot of downs in this one. All right, let's get to the game everybody wants to talk about. Buffalo Bills at the Detroit Lions, the game of the week, maybe the game of the season. Highest over-under of the year. It was at 53.5. It is now up to 54.5. Not much of a jump, but it is a little bit of a step up, and it is projecting to be the highest scoring game of the year. If you remember a few years ago, I want to say it was 2018, we had that Rams Chiefs Monday night. I believe it was Monday night, maybe it was Sunday Night Football, that masterclass where they combined for like 100 points. A lot of people think that's what this game is going to be. I don't think it will. You do get the dome, so you will see Josh Allen be able to unleash that arm. You do get Dalton Kincaid back. You do get Keon Coleman back. You get two healthier teams squaring off. I think that this game is going to be won on the ground from the Detroit Lions. I think I'm worried about playing Jared Goff in this matchup. It goes against a lot of what I preach, and I practice what I preach. If it's a high over-under, I will always take the guy with the higher over-under if it's very, very close for fantasy football. I think Jared Goff is making his MVP campaign. I don't know how well it's going. I mean, he's tied with Lamar for the third in the odds. And if he does beat Josh Allen, he would take a step up in that. That's for sure. But I do not trust the Lions to consistently throw the ball in this game. I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery will combine for like 225 to 50 yards. I think both of them have the upside to score a touchdown in this game. It happens a ton where both of them score on the ground. I think it's going to be a game like that. And because of that, I think Josh Allen will have to keep the ball in the air. I am worried about James Cook. The Lions also very good against running backs, very good against tight ends. So we'll see how the game goes. I think everybody's going to want to tune in for this one. But long story short, high over under, play your stars in this game because the upside is tremendous. As much as I am worried about the running back, you never bench the running back in a high over under. You just can't do it. So, yeah. All right, real quick from John Caldwell. Not in my league, jump shipped on AR, been playing Sam Darnold. Yeah, Sam Darnold's been a great pivot off of Anthony Richardson. Flex play, TJ Hawkinson, Bucky Irving, or Warren. I would go with Warren in that spot. All right, few more games, and then I am going to get out of here. First off, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Philadelphia Eagles. It is a very low over-under, 43.5. Not super low, but low for two offenses that have been rolling. And it's because these two teams have great defenses. You have Mike Tomlin on the road, which is not as great of a spot as many think. Eagles have been on fire. You have the A.J. Brown news of him complaining about his workload, which is a concern for sure. You have Saquon Barkley on his MVP campaign. You have Russell Wilson as one of the only quarterbacks in football that has one loss on the year. So a lot of storyline here. A lot of things happening. I do not want to play Devontae Smith in this one. You also have George Pickens who's out. So it's going to be very interesting to see which wide receiver emerges from that room. I think that it is going to be an Eagles fairly dominant win in this one. I don't, and maybe it's because I've been out on Russ all year, but I'm going to continue to be out. All right. Quick question. Durf Boy, Kyler or Bo Nix? We're going to go with Bo Nix. I don't like the Kyler Murray upside downside over the last few weeks. And Bo has been very, very solid. Top 10 quarterback on the year. I think Kyler's right in that range too. So, but Bo is on a heater and now he's coming off the bye. I really like his matchup against the Colts as well. Tyler Algier or pick up Jaleel or Justice. I do not want to play Tyler Algier in this one. I would go with Jaleel McLaughlin. I'd rather chase the running back that probably sees the field the most of the three of them. Dominant is wild. Steelers plus 5.5. Yeah, I mean, listen, Steelers is probably one of the most bet to cover the spread. I think that the Eagles are going to crush them. I know Tomlin doesn't really get crushed, so I'm going to say I think they win by more than a touchdown. I would say it's maybe a 8, 9, 10-point game, something like that. I do not think the Steelers' offense is going to be able to roll against that defense with no George Pickens. You're going to have to rely on the Eagles turning the ball over, and the Eagles are the hottest team in football at the moment. They're on the biggest win streak in football. Next up, a game nobody wants to talk about. Corner game of the 4 o'clock slate, New England Patriots at the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, I mean, listen, you kind of know who to start at this point. Marv. We like Marv. We like Trey McBride. We kind of love James Conner for how he's been playing. And then on the Patriots side of the ball, we like Ramondre. We like Hunter Henry. So there you go. Blue Crew. Full PPR flex, Bucky Irving, Malik Neighbors, or Calvin Ridley. I am going to go with Malik Neighbors in that one. Bucky's injury worries me. He exited early last week while being dinged up going into the game. Calvin Ridley, I love the upside in this game, but as high as his upside is, so is his downside with Will Levis at quarterback. Malik Neighbors offers the safest floor. The game script should be good. So I would go with Malik in that spot. Conscious Machine. I'm playing Eagles D, benching Buffalo D until 16. Yeah, totally. You do not want to play Buffalo's defense this week for sure. I don't mind the Eagles defense start either. Cole Kmet or Smart. Do I pick up Schultz who's available? I would go with Cole Kmet of the three of them. All right, guys, couple more games. Then we'll get out of here. We will still answer questions. So if you have any more questions that you have, please drop them in the chat. But real quick, while I got some new viewers here, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell if you are on YouTube. We appreciate everybody for tuning in for week 1 of the playoffs. We will be back for week 2, week 3, and we'll see where the audience is at. If some of you need the week 18, if some of you are playing in week 18, maybe we tune in for that one real quick, but we will let you know as it gets closer. Also, make sure to check out our Tuesday show, our Thursday show, Tuesday waiver wire, and some recaps from the week. So now that the season's near the end, I am sure Nick and I will do more recapping of what you need to know for the next 2 weeks of your fantasy football playoffs. And then we will on Thursday do our all boom, all bust team. We give you 7 guys each that we love for the week and 7 guys that we want to either temper expectations or throw on the bench. So definitely tune in for those 2 shows. Don't worry, Rome. I'm not getting out of here real quick. Don't worry. I got 4 more quick games to break down for you guys before we close out of here, but just giving some shameless plugs because we had a bunch of people hop in the chat the last couple minutes. So Tampa Bay at Los Angeles Chargers. This is an interesting one for sure. The Chargers have been running the ball like crazy, and they just have not been since the J.K. Dobbins injury. It kind of is what it is in that spot. But we are definitely paying attention. I like rostering Kamani Vidal. I feel like if they unleash him 1 week and he goes off, he is going to be the number 1 waiver wire guy. So if you are in a deeper league and he is available, he is the guy to stash. On Tampa side of the ball, we are concerned. The Chargers defense is one of the best in football. Bucky Irving has been in and out. So it kind of is what it is in that regard. We hope he could stay healthy and get out on that football field. Mike Evans definitely gives us concern in this matchup, but he has been a very safe fantasy football player for most of his career. So we're not going to overly worry. Okay. Quick question from Rome. Start 2, Tyrone Tracy, Josh Downs, Ladd McConkey, Adam Thielen. I do not think McConkey is going to play, which does worry me, but you can wait to make that decision. You do have some tough one because the Panthers and the Giants play in that 1 o'clock slate. I would play Tyrone Tracy. I don't love it. You know what? Yeah, go with Thielen. Go with Thielen over Tracy. Just because I don't think Tracy's workload is going to be as guaranteed. I'd go Thielen. And then, I mean, the 2 I want is Downs and McConkey. I'd rather McConkey than Downs. So if McConkey is playing, I'd play McConkey over Downs at 4 o'clock. You can make that decision. If McConkey is out, I play Josh Downs. Will you do fantasy basketball? You can DM us on Twitter fantasy basketball questions if you want. We're not going to do it on our Sunday show. I don't do much of it, but I watch basketball and I pay very much attention. I know how it works. I do not have the patience, and I'm sure many of you that are in fantasy football do not have the patience to every single week set your lineup, do waivers, adjust for load managing guys and stuff like that. I think it's very hard to manage. So good for you if you are someone that does at that rate, but that will personally not be me playing. I'll be watching the actual games instead. Sunday night football, huge game. Green Bay Packers at Seattle, massive game for that Seattle division. Green Bay, I hear all of your concerns about Jaden Reed, his upside, his downside over the last few ones. I am in on Jaden Reed. I am not concerned. Josh Jacobs on an absolute tear. The Seattle Seahawks not good against running backs. I was very concerned for DK Metcalf. I'm lightening up on that over the past few weeks, or over the last few days, because Jair Alexander is ruled out. JSN has been your wide receiver 5 on the year. Very shocking to hear that number when I first heard it. And I like the upside there for JSN in that middle of the field. Geno Smith has the third most passing attempts in the league this year. I believe he's behind Joe Burrow, and I don't remember who the second one is off the top of my head. Maybe it's Baker or Darnold. But anyway, he has not been passing. He's been passing at an insanely high clip, insanely high volume. So we do like those receivers over there. And you have Kenneth Walker ruled out. So Zach Charbonnet really starting that fantasy football playoff tear with that win and monster RB1 performance last week. Okay, from Carlos, Garrett Wilson or A.J. Brown, I would go with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is the most targeted receiver through 3 seasons in the NFL. He is tracking to still hold that stat. He was the most targeted rookie receiver ever, and he was the most targeted player through 2 years of an NFL career. He is on pace to make the case for number 3. And we like that matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. A.J. Brown, I do think they are going to try to force feed him in this game, but the Steelers defense is very good, and I'm sure Mike Tomlin is going to do his best to shadow him. Alvin Kamara or Rico Dowdle. I honestly don't mind either way in this game. I like Rico Dowdle's upside against the Carolina Panthers, the worst team against running backs. But Kamara is so much of a better player. The matchup's not great against Washington, but it's not bad. I would go Kamara because I do not know how they're going to effectively move the ball with Jake Haener without Alvin Kamara being a key part of the offense. So I would go Garrett Wilson and Alvin Kamara. If it is a wide receiver flex question, I would go Garrett and A.J. Brown. Only real ones do football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. No one does hockey. No one, I can't imagine doing baseball. That's mind-boggling to me. But football, basketball, happy to give advice on either of those. But again, basketball will not be on the pod. Going to start Brian Thomas over Bucky. Please reassure this decision. It's fine. It's risky either way for sure. Brian Thomas is going to probably get shadowed as much by Sauce as they can, but they are down DJ Reed and Brian and Eccles, so there's upside in that regard where Brian Thomas is in motion. If he is in the slot, he will not see much of Sauce in the game. I'm not going to honestly super reconfirm Mac Jones as wide receiver 1 for you over a very talented rookie running back. I am concerned about Bucky's injuries. So I hear you on not wanting to play him, especially because they said he was healthy. He went out there, his back tightened up, and they pulled him from the game last week. So definitely some concerns for Bucky in that regard. Plan to start Bo over, I assume that's Kyler Murray, not Kyrie Irving. Even though Irving has the better matchup, just struggle to trust him every week. No, yeah, that's totally fair. I do trust Bucky when he's out there, but I do not like the Chargers matchup. So no problem in that regard. Stanley just traded. Okay, guys, no hockey on the pod. That's fine. Keep it in the comments. That's my fault for pulling it up. Anyways, let's go to the Monday Night Football matchups. Huge Division I, Chicago at Minnesota. Minnesota 7-point favorite. Chicago did not look good this past week. With the Eberflus firing, you usually see the new head coach bump. It usually happens. Did not happen for the Chicago Bears this past week. So some definite concerns over there for Chicago and those fantasy football players. I do not think you can confidently start a Chicago Bear, although I do like the matchup on the secondary side, at least for the wide receivers. My co-host Nick, big fan of Keenan Allen in this matchup, so do what you want with that. I am on the opposite side of the grain, but he is a Keenan Allen guy this week, and I'm sure he's a DJ Moore guy in this matchup too. Minnesota, Addison is on an absolute heater. He's averaging, I believe, the second most points per game over the last 4 weeks in fantasy football, which is fantastic. He's had 2 massive bombs in that span, so that explains that. But he's going off. You can't really bench him at this point. The one game that they played earlier this year, Chicago and Minnesota, was on the road in Chicago, and Justin Jefferson got clamped by Jalen Johnson. It was his worst game since his rookie season. And what's it called? And Jordan Addison went nuclear in that one too. So I think Jordan Addison is a lock this week. Last game of the slate, guys. Before I get into it, make sure you drop those questions right now, because we are going to get out of here right after I break this one down for you. So if you got anything else, make sure to comment it real quick. But before you do, like, comment, subscribe. You guys know what to do at this point. Atlanta Falcons at the Las Vegas Raiders. This is such an interesting game to me. You are likely going to get Atlanta. Kirk Cousins might be his last game of his career if he gets absolutely rocked and you get Michael Penix for the rest of the year. He has had 0 touchdowns, 8 interceptions over his last 4 games. He has looked like a shell of himself. His age is showing. It has not been great. And now he goes up against Vegas. There is no Max Crosby in this game, so he should have some more time to throw. He has a very talented offense against a very weak defense. It's interesting. It is very interesting to watch. I do not mind you playing Drake London. I love you playing Bijan Robinson. I do not know about the rest of those options over there. That is really your call, because if you trusted those guys, continue to trust them. But I personally cannot trust your Darnell Mooney's and your Ray McLeods and your guys like that. Las Vegas Raiders on the other side of the ball. It might be Desmond Ridder revenge game. And listen, it's Monday Night Football. We do not want to see Desmond Ridder versus old Kirk Cousins. But it's a good storyline, and it'll be an interesting one to pay attention to. I don't know if it'll be a good watch, but it'll be an interesting one for actual football to pay attention to. And obviously some real draft questions. For Vegas, I love Brock Bowers in this matchup, as I have the entire time. I think Sincere McCormack, very solid pivot. If you need a deep running back, and RB2, if you've had some guys go down. And I love Jacoby Myers in the matchup. So that's it, guys. That's it for the 1 o'clock slate. Big week, because you got 15 games of football on this Sunday. A lot of games to break down, a lot of questions. Thank you all who have tuned into the podcast. I know we got a lot of support from the Barstool bump, we'll call it. We are not affiliated with Barstool at all. I should make that disclaimer. From Nick's interview, Nick unfortunately couldn't be here, but did get to tune in to the chat for a little bit. So appreciate Nick being able to do that for us. Let's get into your last few questions before we get out of here. Let's start with Dale Sullivan. Gibbs or Monty started Kyron PPR, have Chase Brown as the other starter. My God, what a running back slate. I'd bench Chase Brown, and I would play both Gibbs and Monty. Chase Brown's been great. I would rather not lose because you picked the wrong Lions running back. I think both Lions running backs can combine for 40 plus. I have no problem playing both of them. I honestly probably would have told you don't play Kyron of the 3 of them. At least Kyron got to that double-digit mark. But I cannot pivot off of Gibbs and Monty at this point. I'd rather play the 2 of them. And bench Chase Brown. It might be a crazy take. If you are dead set on playing one, it's got to be Gibbs, because the upside for Gibbs is so much higher than Monty. But I really do not want to bench either. I can't leave a Lions running back on my bench this week. And last question of the show, Bucky Irving or Tyrone Tracy? I would go Bucky Irving in the spot. Tyrone Tracy, bad matchup against the Ravens, one of the top 5 teams against the running back position. I think they're going to have to pivot to the passing game very early to try and keep up with Lamar. Lamar against the NFC has an insane record. They run the ball. They dominate time and possession. It's been the formula for them to win. The Giants have the lowest implied point total of any team has this season. It's one of the biggest spreads on the year. It's 16.5. It is really, really a bad situation for the Giants, and I don't think you can start them, to be honest. So I don't mind Trey. I love Tracy. I think he's very talented. I don't know if with this offense and this offensive line, we watched Saquon Barkley struggle with this Giants team and not be matchup proof. Tyron Tracy is not Saquon Barkley, and that for me is enough reason to play Bucky, who I think is the more talented running back. Obviously, he's had some injury concerns the last few weeks that are still concerning, but that is what it is. Rome, I don't know if you're actually starting either of these two. If I was going to start one, I would go with Jake Haener. And another question, Patrick Hodgins, real quick. Tight end PPR, Henry or Smart? We've gotten this question a lot, actually. I would go with Henry, and then PPR, Jameson Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. That's a good one. I wish you had another pivot. Safe floor is Marvin Harrison. High upside is Jameson Williams. You can make the decision, but I want a piece of that high over under game. I would go with Jameson Williams and hope on that big play touchdown. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We will be live next week with our co-host, Nick, running the live show. We'll be answering all your questions for the second week of your fantasy football playoffs. Wishing you guys all the best, all love. Hopefully we got to make some of the right start decision. We're not going to be 100% over here, but professional bettors are 60 or about 53%. So we're shooting for about 60 to 70%. If we could do that, then we helped a lot of people win a lot of money and win a lot of fantasy leagues this week. Appreciate you all. We will see you on Tuesday for our waiver wire and our 5 recaps of the week. We will see you Thursday for our all boom, all bust. But most importantly, we will see you next Sunday for our second week of the fantasy football playoffs, live to answer all of your fantasy football questions. Thank you guys, and we will see you next week.